Welcome back, everyone, to the Beginner to Master Speedrun, episode number 29. Coming into today, rated 1349 on a 94 game win streak, so quickly approaching 100 games. And before I start playing today, I do have a small announcement. If there's anyone watching who's based in St. Louis, I will be doing an in-person event at the St. Louis Chess Club this weekend, February 24th. Basically, I'll be playing any challengers, so if you want to come and meet me and play me completely free, the games will be filmed for content, so hope to see maybe some of you there. Let me know below if you plan on coming. But yeah, for now, we're going to stay in the two-dimensional world, and let's hop into the first game. Okay, playing Banam Lazim. And we have a queen spawn. I'll play the usual, pawn d5. Hopefully not mouse slip. And knight c3. Okay, so this could be the start of a Jobava London. If white plays bishop f4, this is a Jobava London. It's been a more trendy opening recently. I know a lot of players have courses on Jobava London. Nerditsky has a course, Hans Niemann has a course.
Did Hans actually make a Jobava course? I couldn't tell if you were.
Please don't.
I don't.
Not below for Hans. Below the belts. This one.
I don't think he made a
Yeah,
Jobava.
he definitely did make a Jobava one.
Oh, really?
He did.
Oh, I'm sorry now.
So against this opening, there are a few approaches for black. Probably the most solid is pawn e6. But the move I like to play is pawn c5. It's a bit more aggressive, targeting the pawn on d4. Now white takes the pawn on c5, which is not the most common move. Like usually white will play something like e3 or sometimes e4 there. But with pawn takes pawn, I mean, the first move that comes to mind is pawn d4, gaining space and attacking the knight. Let's go for this. If white plays knight b5, looks scary, threatening knight c7, but then I'll have queen a5 check to attack the king and the knight. So yeah, I think white had to move backwards there. And I mean, I'm down a pawn, but I can win it back. I mean, if I really want to win it back by force, there's queen a5 check, attacking c5 and the king. Might be better just to start with knight c6, which prepares e5. Calculating knight c6, knight f3. Maybe then I'll decide what to do. Let's start with this move. Very natural developing move. If white goes for knight f3, then I'll probably choose between queen a5, as in say, or bishop g4. White plays a3, so white's preparing pawn b4. But I don't think white's going to be in time to play that, because I start with e5, attacking the bishop, getting ready to take the pawn. So this opening is already going really, really well. I mean, white has had to retreat the knight, retreat the bishop. I'm way ahead in development. Very good control over the center. So white redevelops knight to d2. And I think the plan going forward from here is just to complete development, get the king safe. And I think it's going to be hard for white to develop the king side. Like if white plays knight gf3, I can strike with pawn e4. So white plays h4. Kind of random move. I don't quite see what white's trying to do. Like maybe knight h3, so if I take, the rook can take. So, I mean, there's a lot of good-looking options here. I could play bishop f5, probably the most natural developing move. I could play e4, grabbing more space, maybe ideas of e3. I kind of like pawn e4. I'm delaying developing the bishop because maybe it's best coming to g4. Yeah, there's times when like these moves would be overextending, but in this case, the pawns are really well supported. And they can be supported further with the rook and the bishop. queen can come into the center. So we can see how, like, one seemingly small mistake in the opening, maybe a couple of small mistakes, and get started on move 4 when white took this pawn, and it snowballed into this position. But the thing is, I'm not up material, well, until now. Yeah, that's a free bishop. I was going to say that maybe it would still take some work to win material, but white made things a bit easy there. And now I'm wondering if I can just go for mating attack. And if the queen gets to g3, it's checkmate. I mean, with pawn f3, pawn e3 looks really, really attractive here. Yeah, I don't want to take and allow white to develop. So let's go for pawn e3. Yeah, usually I try to show like no sympathy for my opponent, but I kind of feel bad for white's position. I mean, everything is pretty much paralyzed on the king side. White is attacking the bishop on c5. So what to do? I'm wondering if I can play queen c7. Like, I'm calculating queen c7 to try and set up some eventual queen g3. Although that would maybe... like, queen c7, knight takes d4... I'm really spoiled for choice here. Take a moment to look at the other candidate moves. And there's a calculation. Queen c7, knight takes d4, and then knight takes f3. And then if either knight takes back, or the g-pawn takes back, I'll have queen g3 checkmate. So basically after this, and then this, and then this, I guess white could take with the e-pawn, and then check, and then king e2, and then check, and then king d3. And then I can take the knight. I'll win back the piece. I'll have rook d8 and bishop f5 coming. Yeah, let's go for that. It's one of these positions that maybe it was easy to overthink things or keep calculating. Maybe I did overthink things, but yeah, there's going to be some issues for white with this g3 square. Now, white does have the time advantage. I've fallen below 5 minutes. And white would probably like to prepare casting queenside. The problem is, yeah, the queen can't really move forward, controlling so many squares. f4 is interesting, because, yeah, when I move the knight, there's going to be pawn g3. f4 is actually pretty resourceful. So how about I'll go for knight g4, not only hitting the f-pawn, but also threatening the fork. Oh, maybe white can play knight h3 and try and defend everything. It's still taking some work. I mean, the bishop and pawn are still pressured by the knight. I mean, what if I go in? Knight f2, and then takes, and then takes, and then takes. And then I can take on f4 with check, knight g4. That looks pretty good. So not quite winning the rook or queen, but this seems like good progress. And if the king runs this way, there will be queen f4, and the king can't hide. Okay, so checking the king. And d3 is a move I should be keeping an eye for too. King returns to e1. So, I mean, queen g3 is the most forcing move, forcing king d2. I'm also considering this. Maybe I can start with queen g3, provoke king d2, and then play queen e3. But where's my checkmate? Bishop's attacked. If I play knight here, there's queen d3. But then queen f2. Okay, let's go for this. I do want to give kudos to my opponent for surviving. Like, it's... we can see, like, at this rating level, opponents don't go down as easily as maybe lower ratings. And just as I say that, my opponent resigns. Yeah, I was gonna say that queen d3 would keep the game going. It gives the king the square on d1. I was gonna check and then play bishop f5. I mean, there'd be a lot of different ways to convert the position. But definitely a feel-good game to start this episode. Hopefully this gives some insight into how to play against the Jobava London. At least on move 3, c5 is a nice recommendation. And usually white should play e3 or e4. These are the two most common moves. E3 is a bit more solid, after which I could take, and then very often black should play a6, preventing knight b5, and then develop from here. If e4, this is a slightly more complicated line. The move I usually like to go for is knight takes e4. And yeah, maybe I'll link a game I played against Naroditsky in this line. Managed to beat him with some nice prep. But yeah, going back to what happened in the game, white just fell victim to this very, very strong pawn center. A3 was just probably too slow. White should have played knight f3. And then I think I was going to play bishop g4 to try and set up takes and then pawn e5. And I think this position is still probably a bit preferable for black. But anyway, hopefully some lessons to take away there. Let's move on to the next game. Playing Sasmatch. Sasmatch? I don't know how to pronounce this name. But this time we have a king's pawn. And yeah, we'll keep it with a normal opening. This is a bishop's opening. Now, there's a lot of playable moves here. There's knight f6 and knight c6 and bishop c5. I usually like to start with knight f6, simply attacking the pawn, trying to castle kingside as quickly as possible. Very often, white will play d3 or knight c3. Knight f3 would be some kind of gambit. And knight f3 would actually be a Bodin-Kieseritsky gambit, where I could take, and then there's knight c3. It's like a kind of reverse Stafford gambit. I think we're well past the level of players going for scholars mates. When I was really young, I had an opponent play queen h5 and just lose a queen in this position, so I don't think we'll see that. We do see knight to f3, so yeah, this is not the most typical move order. Like, usually white will defend the e-pawn in response to knight f6. So I'm going to accept the gambit. Knight takes e4. If I wanted to play a bit more safe, I could have played knight to c6. Now, I guess it's not quite a gambit. If white wanted to gambit, they could have played knight c3. I think this is the most challenging move. With what my opponent played, I can play pawn d5, making sure that I'm not losing f7, and I'm hitting the bishop, reinforcing the knight. Now, white doesn't move the bishop, plays queen f3. I definitely don't want to take the bishop, because, yeah, this is a pretty big threat. So, I mean, bishop e6 looks most natural. Just develop and defend. Keep it simple. Bishop is still attacked. Now, maybe white could leave the bishop here, because if I take it, then it would just be a trade. White could then take the knight. So I wonder if maybe white's considering castling. White does castle. Now, I was going to say, the drawback of trying to be tricky like this is I'm going to have some potential tactical options. And even though, yeah, if I take the bishop, I lose the knight, I can look for moves to do something with my knight and to keep the bishop attacked. And the move that sticks out is knight g5. getting the knight to a safe square, attacking the queen, and keeping the bishop attacked. And I think I'm going to be winning a piece after this move. So yeah, the queen's going to have to move. Even if it moves to hit my knight's defended by my queen. And really, wherever the queen moves, I'm ready to take the bishop. So white probably should have retreated the bishop, maybe given a check there, rather than castling. Okay, queen b3. That's actually probably one of the best attempts to muddy the waters, hitting the pawn on b7. So if I take, and then white takes, the rook will be attacked. But then I'll have probably a few options, either knight d7 or bishop d5. So let's go for this. Yeah, bishop d5 looks really nice. Attacking the queen, essentially defending the rook through x-ray vision. And the queen defends the bishop. If queen b5 check, I can just block with c6. And with bishop d5, I'm already like maybe setting up some attacking ideas against the white king. And I should keep in mind moves like knight h3, queen g5 ideas. I mean, another approach for black going forward is just to develop like bishop d6 and castling. Of course, I have to get out of check first. So, yeah, if I play c6, white could return to b7. It's a little bit weird, because, yeah, the rook would again be attacked. A c6, queen b7, knight d7. Then there's knight takes d7, and if queen takes, I lose a rook. If I block with a knight here, I lose my bishop. So white's definitely being resourceful. I mean, c6 still seems like the way to go, but I mean, I want to have a plan in mind if we see queen b7 again. Perhaps I could just play bishop d6, lose a rook, win the knight. And that looks pretty good. And there's really not too many options. I think, yeah, c6 is a move to play. Oh, knight takes c6. Well, that looks like a free piece. Yeah, the queen defends the bishop, which defends the knight. And even with white controlling the e-file, I can block the check. And now I'm up 2 pieces. Life is pretty good now. Still have all the minor pieces on the board. Okay, queen c5, so trying to taunt my pinned bishop. So let's unpin the bishop. Everything's still defended. Like it's a nice construction where everything pretty much defends each other. Pawn d4. I mean, even my knight's defended by the bishop. But I was going to say also, yeah, the queen was hanging there. I think maybe white didn't quite address the fact my bishop was unpinned. So, yeah, en passant would not have been forced. I would just take the queen. Another pretty clean, smooth game. Another kind of opening disaster for my opponent. Maybe they got tricked up with the move order. Of course, yeah, d3 or knight c3 are the safer options. And usually if white goes for this position, the move to play is knight c3. And then if I take and then take, it's basically a reverse version of the Stafford Gambit. And the only good move for black in this position is to play f6. And there is some theory surrounding this line. At a high level, black should be okay, but it's definitely white putting on the early pressure. Of course, what happened in the game with d5 and yeah, and then castling, I mean, this was really the big blunder from white. And when I won the piece, things were pretty smooth sailing. I do quickly want to show what would have happened if queen b7, because I think I was going to play bishop d6, And yeah, black is doing really well here. Even if I do lose a rook in the corner, I can then take the knight on e5. But it's actually funny because the engine is saying that there's a better move than bishop takes e5. There's knight h3 check, and then if pawn takes h3, then I can take the knight, and then queen g5 is a mate threat. Yeah, the bishops are pretty nasty in this position. If d3, there's queen f6, threatening queen g6 with mating ideas. And this would have been really fun to play. So, yeah, hopefully a lesson for my opponent to take away from this game. Let's keep it going. Let's do at least one more. Playing Chris OB. This time I'm white. I'll play pawn e4. And we have a Caro Kann. Against a Caro Kann, usually like to play the two knights attack. It's one of the quickest ways to develop. And yeah, we trade on e4, and we see bishop f5. So a few years ago, I made a video about this specific variation. And bishop f5, it's one of the most natural moves, but it's not actually that great against this specific opening. And the reason why is white can get some pretty quick initiative, starting with h4, threatening to trap the bishop. There's a very similar line in the Caro Kann, basically the classical variation, where there's a pawn on d4 and no knight on f3, and that would be like a pretty standard theory. But with this knight developed to f3, there's a really nice move knight e5. And this is still opening preparation. And yeah, black maybe not addressing the fact I wanted to take on g6. Most people will play bishop h7 there, which I can show after the game. But with knight f6, I'm very happy to take and then essentially ruin the pawn structure on the king side for black. So g6 is now pretty big weakness. And if I want, I could play bishop d3 right away to attack the pawn. I mean, there would be king f7 to defend. I think it's probably better to play d4 first, just ensuring that when I play bishop d3, I'm not blocking the pawn, and this bishop can develop quickly. Yeah, bishop d3 is very likely coming next. And I'm now threatening checkmate in 1. So I think every game so far has just been an opening disaster for my opponents, getting into trouble early. With every opening, I really haven't been doing anything that special. It's just following opening principles, seizing the opportunity to cause problems in my opponent's position. We do see king f7, so defending the pawn. And there are a few moves that come to mind here. h5 does look pretty attractive. After takes, I can take. Bishop c4 is worth considering, but then there's pawn e6. And queen e2 comes to mind. The idea to set up bishop c4. There's also the idea of c3, queen c2 to create the battery against g6. So yeah, sometimes it's tough to decide when there's a lot of good-looking options. I mean, this is one of the more forcing options. So if takes and then takes, am I accomplishing that much? I don't think I am. Another option is just to develop, like bishop f4. And bishop f4 could run into knight d5. I mean, I definitely don't want to overthink things. I'm actually leaning towards c3 now. Because not only am I setting up queen c2, but I'm also setting up queen b3 to hit the king and b pawn. Yeah, let's go for c3. This also prevents queen a5 from coming with check. So black pretty quickly plays e6. And now queen b3 doesn't come with check, but queen c2 looks simple and strong, just, yeah, applying more pressure to g6. I mean, g5 can't really be played because I'll take, and then there's a pin on the h-file. So it looks like I'm guaranteed to win this g-pawn. Let's take on g6. The king is going to have to choose. Moves to g8. Yeah, it's very ugly when you have to put a king on g8 and keep the rook on h8. So the rook is not coming to the f-file anytime soon. Now, it is possible that black wants to take and damage my structure. So, what to do? I was briefly looking at knight f5 with idea takes and then queen b3, but then there's knight d5, so I don't want to go too crazy. I mean, I could play queen b3. Yeah, might as well. Let's start with this. Like, not only am I attacking both pawns, but I'm also pinning this e6 pawn. So if black plays a move to somehow defend this pawn... Actually, I'm realizing if black defends this pawn, I'll win this pawn. I guess the point I want to make is if black plays a move like queen e7, then I could take on b7, or I could play knight f5, exploiting the fact that e-pawn is pinned. So knight d5 is probably a decent choice given the situation. Blocking the diagonal. And I probably don't want to take on b7 right away. Would give black some unnecessary counterplay. My queen could get stuck on the queen side. So now I think I'm better off playing knight e4. And it was a nice sequence because queen b3 came with a threat. It provoked this, which gave me access to e4. And now knight e4 is coming with a threat against the bishop. So it seems like for the last many moves, I've been the one making threats and dictating play. Queen c7, okay, defending the bishop and the pawn. I mean, I could take, and then take. I'll look for my other options. Another idea is to play pawn c4, remove the knight, and then play pawn c5, which would attack the bishop and unleash the queen. Yeah, let's go for that. The threats are not stopping. I mean, it's a very nice example of initiative. This is a term that I'll throw around a lot. It basically refers to a sequence of moves that are making threats against the opponent. Now, black plays knight f6, so offering the trade in knights. I don't have to move the knight because it's defended by my bishop. Yeah, c5 looks really nice here. Attacking the bishop and threatening queen takes e6, which would be mate in 2. Even if black takes on e4, I don't take either minor piece, I just go for the mate. Queen e6, king f8, and then queen f7 checkmate. So it looks like I'll be winning more material. Or I'll just be winning the game next move. Okay, very smooth game. Yeah, it feels like all the games this episode kind of fit the same theme. Like getting a pretty substantial advantage from early on and then showing no mercy. Maybe black could have tried knight f8. I mean, this is probably the best way to defend, covering the pawn and hitting the bishop. But yeah, I mean, the position is really, really good for whites. I could take on d6, hitting the queen, take on f6 next, and everything was in my control. So going back, I do want to just provide one quick lesson in the opening. For anyone that plays a Caro Kann, if you encounter the two knights attack, you should not go for bishop f5 in this position. This is really the start of black stumbling into a pretty bad line. The better move to play here is knight f6. This is the main line. There's also knight d7 to prepare knight f6. Very playable, also very common at the GM level. But once black plays bishop f5 and bishop g6, white's just having all the fun. And just to show the cool line that stems from bishop to h7, white can follow up with queen h5, threatening mate. This would basically provoke g6. If queen d5, there's bishop c4 with a nice skewer. And after pawn g6 here, white can play a really nice move, not a queen move, but rather bishop c4 and say, oh no, my queen. If black takes it, it's checkmate. Black would have to stop the mate threat. The best move is pawn e6. And then there's a really sneaky move, queen to e2. And I show this line in my 2 knights video on how to crush the Caro Kann. I'll leave a link below. But after queen e2, there's a lot of ways black can walk into the coming trap. White's now threatening knight takes f7, followed by queen takes e6. So a lot of natural developing moves, bishop g7, knight f6, knight d7, and bishop d6, these all walk into the same idea, knight takes f7, just to show, let's say bishop g7, knight takes f7, and if king takes, white is mating with queen e6 and queen f7. So really nasty line, very important line to be aware of if you play the Caro Kann. So hopefully a lesson for my opponent to take away, also for the viewers to take away. I think we'll end it there. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, if you have questions, leave them below. If you like the content, do subscribe. It does help the channel. And I'll see you guys soon.